Mystery Babylon Exposed.
The following presentation contains serious subject matter, and for apparent reasons, the speakers choose to conceal their identity. Occultism must win the day before the end of the 21st century. The Zohar appeals to many Jews in a way that makes them regard it as the most sacred of sacred books, for it mirrors Judaism as an intensely vital religion of the spirit, more overpoweringly than any other book or code, more even than the Bible, does it give to the Jew the conviction of an inner, unseen spiritual universe, an eternal moral order. The influence of the Kabbalah has been great, for it has been one of the most powerful forces ever to affect the inner development of Judaism, both horizontally and in depth. If one turns to the writings of great Kabbalists, one seldom fails to be torn between alternate admiration and disgust.
Today, we are standing on the threshold of Earth's history, wherein the final countdown between Satan and Yahweh is reaching the climax. The Bible warns us about the intensity of Satan's fierce one-world Machiavellian plans.
Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time.
In this video, you will witness the shameful teachings of the synagogue of Satan, the Kabbalah. I will be presenting the views of the liberal Reformed Jews, the Hasidic Orthodox interpretation, and other splintered teachings on the Kabbalah. To make my point about the dangerous teachings of the Kabbalah, I will be quoting largely from authors who are in favor of the Kabbalah, using quotes from the Kabbalah itself and other occult sources. The Dictionary of Mysticism and the Occult defines the word Kabbalah to mean an oral tradition. This is the key of keeping the satanic knowledge secret by passing it on to a tightly knitted filtered circle of initiates orally. I recently was in the occult section of a bookstore. I saw a woman eagerly looking at the books on the Kabbalah. We entered into a discussion. I mentioned that it was not long ago that the Kabbalah was reserved for the Jews. Some Kabbalists impose some restrictions in studying the Kabbalah. They say the initiate has to be at least married. Also, the initiate must be over 40 years of age and trustworthy. Today, Many liberal Kabbalists reject these rules. I said to her, is it logical to expect the traditional Kabbalists, after so many years of secrecy, to impart this knowledge freely in these books?
No one boasts about their studies. No one usually talks about them either. Most students, when asked, will deny that they are even studying this material. This is the right way to be: modest, concealed, silent, and secret. Even if everybody is studying, no one should be talking. Serious Torah students study Kabbalah and do not advertise it.
She thought about it and concluded with me that these books are meant to satisfy the curiosity of the masses while hiding the true teachings of the Kabbalah. I met her on another occasion and showed her some of the teachings of the Kabbalah. She was revolted. She was once one out of many people who panted after the secret knowledge of the Kabbalah.
A longing for Kabbalah is abroad in the land. Even people with little connection to Judaism, no knowledge of Hebrew, many of them in fact non-Jews, are seeking initiation into the secret chambers of Jewish esoteric knowledge.
When humans hear something is secret, we are driven to know. Naturally, we are curious people. Modern-day Kabbalists supposedly disseminate the Kabbalistic knowledge to the masses, are deceiving people into believing that they possess the secrets of the Kabbalah. Rabbi David Genzelman, the director of Makar, says,
It's not the Kabbalah that I know. People take 2 years of classes, and I don't think they learn a thing about Judaism. They learn about proactive versus reactive. Rabbi Grunman interprets the Zohar to a roomful of the uninitiated. In that class, he'd read one passage in Aramaic, which none of his students understood, so he told them to shut their eyes and listen to the vibration of the letters.
The people who are drawn to this Kabbalistic jargon are not uneducated people. Many of them are idolized by many.
Rabbi Shmuley Boteach thinks Michael Jackson can help rebuild his religion. Lectures he hosted drew as many as 2,000 students. Often, most of them were not Jewish, and often the speakers came from the secular world, including Mikhail Gorbachev, the Latin American soccer star Diego Maradona, Jerry Springer, and Boy George. Shmuley says everyone, both Jews and non-Jews, is going to embrace Judaism.
Many actors are Kabbalized, according to the Jerusalem Report.
Hot on the heels of the first generation of Hollywood Kabbalah groupies, a new batch of showbiz devotees has jumped on the Jewish mysticism bandwagon described in our cover story. The neophytes included Marla Maples, ex-wife of real estate mogul Donald Trump. New York Magazine said, the Georgia-born Baptist ex-showgirl, eager to please the man in her life, financier Michael Mueller, attends classes in L.A., a few steps ahead of Maples, Oscar-winning actress Gwyneth Paltrow, singer Lionel Richie, and Michael Jackson. For Maples, the non-star in the crowd, Kabbalah may be a trump card in busting into the movies.
I take classes.
Me too. I'm addicted to it. What's your favorite?
Kabbalah.
Rabbi Boteach's candid statement about the Kabbalah will show why it's so popular among the heathen. He unmistakably shows the truth that the Kabbalah is opposed to Christianity.
Also, he thinks Judaism equips people better than Christianity to enjoy material success and still be holy in God's eyes, making it ideal in this age of prosperity. The Jewish message is, of course you can have it both ways, Shmuley says. We've accommodated ambition. You just have to give money to charity. Jesus says it's more difficult for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to pass through an eye of a needle. You'll never find a sentiment like that expressed in a Jewish work.
In the 1800s, the queen occultist Helena Blavatsky wrote about the popularity of the Kabbalah and its attacks upon the church.
The last quarter of our century is witnessing an extraordinary outbreak of occult studies, and magic dashes once more its powerful waves against the rocks of the church and science, which it is slowly but as surely undermining. Anyone whose natural mysticism impels him to seek for sympathetic contact with other minds is astonished to find how large a number of persons are not only interested in mysticism generally, but are actually themselves Kabbalists. The river dammed during the Middle Ages has flowed since noiselessly underground, and has now burst up as an irrepressible torrent. Hundreds today study the Kabbalah.
At thekabbalahcenter.com, you can purchase baseball caps, t-shirts, hands-free Kabbalah water bottle carriers, Kabbalah love and astrology candles. The reform movement among the Kabbalists are making it rich off the ignorance of their disciples. The traditional Kabbalists are disgusted with the idea of entertaining non-Jews with the Kabbalah. They believe that Jewish mysticism, however deceptively presented, should not be brought to the Gentiles' attention. Rabbi Obadiah Yosef was quoted in a widely read Jewish newspaper called the Jewish Press, demanding that every male Jew should embrace the Kabbalah. If not, they will be punished.
I believe it is imperative that the Orthodox community re-embrace mystical Judaism. Many Hasidic rabbis were all adepts of Kabbalah and wrote extensively on the topic. Therefore, anyone who wishes to state any opinions to either discredit the Holy Zohar as being the legitimate teachings of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, or to disrespect or discredit the Kabbalah in general, is to be considered a heretic. Every male Jew must study Kabbalah. Rabbi Obadiah Yosef has said in his Yevadai Da'at, "It is a true and correct thing that the value of Kabbalah study is very sublime, and great will be the punishment for those who do not study the secrets of Torah."
When the neophyte is initiated into the true secrets of Jewish mysticism, he is warned not to divulge the secrets of the Kabbalah.
The Hebrews taught that to divulge after initiation into the rabbinical mysteries, the secret of Kabbalah, was like eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. It was punishable by death.
With these chilling threats and many rabbinical antics, we can understand why the Kabbalah has an important place in Judaism. Salo Baron was a highly respected professor of Jewish history at Columbia University. In Volume 8 of his 18-volume work, A Social and Religious History of the Jews, said the following:
The great days of the Kabbalah as a major historic force in the destinies of the Jewish people lay in the future.
We can see the Kabbalization of the world, and not just the Jews, is coming to pass. Let us take a brief historical look at the Kabbalah and then explore some of its teachings. There are different views of the genesis of the Zohar. The Standard Jewish Encyclopedia mentions some of the divergent opinions.
In the work, authorship of the Zohar is ascribed to the Tana Simeon ben Yochai, his colleagues, and disciples. Some defend its early authorship, or at least the antiquity of certain sections. Others regard it as the result of a lengthy development. Others consider it to have been written as late as the end of the 13th century by the Spanish Kabbalist Moses de Leon, while others are of the opinion that Moses de Leon utilized ancient material, adding his own contributions. It seems that the two earliest strata were composed between 1280 and 1285 in Spain, and the third by another Kabbalist who was acquainted with the Zohar proper and attempted to imitate it. From the main body of the work there emerges the figure of a strong personality belonging to the Kabbalistic school, reflecting the development of Jewish mysticism in the 13th century.
Whether it was written by Simeon ben Yochai in the 2nd century or by the Spanish Kabbalist Moses de Leon in the 13th century, the point remains that myriads of people are influenced by it. The Kabbalah presents a symbolic explanation of the origin of the universe. the relationship of human beings to the Godhead, and an emanationist approach to creation, whereby the infinite light manifests through 10 Sephiroth on the tree of life. The Dictionary of Mysticism and the Occult defines the function of the 10th Sephiroth.
The Sephiroth represent levels of spiritual reality, both in the cosmos and in people, because the tree, metaphorically, is the body of God, and people are created in his image. The tree is sometimes shown superimposed on the body of Adam Kadmon, the archetypal man. The 10 Sephiroth in descending order are Kether, Chokmah, Binah, Kesed, Jeberah, Tifereth, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malkuth.
The Kabbalah has spiritual links with Gnosticism and other early mystical cosmologies. Wallace Budge was keeper of Egyptian and Assyrian antiquities at the British Museum a century ago. He admitted to this fact in his book, Amulets and Talismans.
The Kabbalah of the Middle Ages represents a mass of beliefs and traditions, which the Hebrews adopted from the Egyptians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, Syrians, Zoroastrians, Gnostics, Greeks, Arabs, and even European peoples. And whilst readily accepting new beliefs and theories, they abandon nothing.
In the introduction of the Sansino edition of the Zohar, written by J. Ambelson, he did not hesitate to show the complex nature of the Zohar and its connections to other mystical traditions.
From a survey of the whole subject, one is drawn irresistibly to the conclusion that the Zohar, so far from being a homogeneous work, is a compilation of a mass of material drawn from many strata of Jewish and non-Jewish mystical thought and covering numerous centuries. Some scholars find a good deal of background of the Zohar in the religion of the ancient Zoroastrianism, the allegorical type of exegesis of which Philo is the leading exponent, Gnostic theories concerning the relation between the human and the divine, echoes of medieval beliefs regarding astrology, necromancy, magic, and metempsychosis. All these elements jostle one another at random in the pages of the Zohar.
We have to admit that the Kabbalah is unique. It's the only religion that embodies all these mystical teachings under one umbrella. Before Gershom Scholem died in 1982, he was professor of Jewish mysticism at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He readily admits to the connection between the Kabbalah and the world of mythology, especially the Gnostic imprint on the earliest Kabbalistic text, the Behar.
The great symbols of the Kabbalah certainly spring from the depths of creative and genuinely Jewish religious feeling, but at the same time, they are invariably tinged by the world of mythology. It must be kept in mind that the whole meaning and purpose of those ancient myths and metaphors, whose remainders the editors of the book Bahir, and therefore the whole Kabbalah, inherited from the Gnostics.
The author of the Zohar extracted various different teachings of Gnosticism and rebuffs it to his own liking. Gershom Scholem gives us many examples of the parallels between the Zohar and Gnosticism. Having a lot of information still to be covered, I will quote one example.
Thus, he displays the greatest interest in a group of ideas which owes its very development to the already mentioned Gnostical school, the idea of a left emanation, of an ordered hierarchy of the potencies of evil, the realm of Satan, which, like the realm of light, is organized in 10 spheres or stages. The 10 holy Sephiroth have their counterparts in 10 unholy or impure ones. The latter, however, are distinguished from the former in that each one has a highly personal character. Each, therefore, has a personal name proper to itself, while the names of the divine Sephiroth merely represent abstract qualities such as wisdom, intelligence, grace, beauty, etc.
The Universal Jewish Encyclopedia is clear about the Babylonian and Zoroastrian roots of the Kabbalah.
Although Palestine was the birthplace of Jewish mysticism, the land where the Kabbalah was conceived and born, it was in Babylonia that it attained its greatest importance. Circumstances favored its development, for in Babylonia there was much discussion among the adherents of the various religions, as a result of which the Jews became familiar with many ideas that later were incorporated in Kabbalah. The fantastic theories of the Zoroastrian religion, a system of ghosts and demons, of angels and devils, of reward and punishment, of an upper and nether world, provided a fertile impulse to Jewish speculative students.
Demonology plays an important part in many Kabbalistic works. Kabbalists perform ritual magic with the assistance of imps, which they say have supernatural powers to manipulate nature.
Demonology, therefore, occupies an important position in the works of many Kabbalists, for the imps are related to those beings that are generally designated as demons, being endowed with various supernatural powers and with insight into the hidden realms of lower nature, and even occasionally into the future and the higher spiritual world. Magic may be practiced with the help of these beings, the Kabbalists meaning white magic in contrast to the black art.
מהם נאמרת תפילה. כל המילים נעלמו בקולי.
רק מה שאתה רואה אתה אומר, בסדר? חזר?
כן.
מה הוא הביא איתו?
כבש על הכתפיים.
כבש על הכתפיים? תגיד להם, תשחטו?
תשחטו.
את הכבש?
כבש.
ותעשו?
ותעשו.
חגיגה.
חגיגה.
שחטו את הכבש? נעלמו? נעלמו. שמעת או לא? כן, זה נגמר.
Following the healer in his work, we see that he emulates the God of Genesis by taking part in the creation process. In Jewish philosophy, names are the form given to the substance or object. By asking for the patient's own name and mother's name, the healer is grasping at the patient's very essence. Rather than simply identifying the name with the person, he is delving into the individual's destiny. The name is broken down into letters for their numerical value. Since Hebrew has no numerical system, letters have always been used to number things. The words for number and book both share a common root. The power inherent in such a system is described in the mystical Book of Creation.
ב-32 נתיבות פליאות חוכמה, חקק השם אדוני צבאות, אלוהי ישראל, אלוהים חיים, וקדוש שמו, וברא את עולמו ב3 ספרים, בספר וספר וסיפור.
Once the healer has broken down the names into letters with numerical values, he can proceed from form to substance. Unexpected new meanings are found for the name based on its numerical value, and the patient is suddenly linked to entirely new concepts and ideas. This system deconstructs our fundamental banal understanding of reality. People who delve into this system too often do tend to question and doubt the tangible reality of this world. With the name turned into numbers, the healer then picks up a worn old book left in a corner. This book, which has been handed down for generations, is a key tool in the healer's art, yet it is not a medical text. Rather, it is a means of divining, not unlike the conch shells used in the Caribbean or the kola nut in Africa. The prophetic insights it provides lend significance to what was, is, and will be, as long as the numerical values are constant and unchanging. This might explain why Jews are so adamant to bury any Torah scroll with even one letter missing.
תחזיקי את זה בצורה הזו. אנחנו נצטרך להדליק קטע מסוים, את תחבי את זה, תקריבי את זה לגוף ותנשימי את העשן שעולה מזה. תאמרי 3 פעמים, אלוהה,
אלוהה,
דרבי מאיר,
דרבי מאיר,
עננה,
עננה,
אלוהה,
אלוהה,
דרבי מאיר,
דרבי מאיר,
עננה,
עננה,
אלוהה,
אלוהה, דרבי מאיר, עננה.
יהיה לך רפואה בעזר השם. תחבי את זה בבקשה. העשן שעולה, תנשימי. תנשימי את זה לאט לאט בניחותה. שוב. תחבי זאת. וכן. נשאר עוד מעט, טיפה.
Witches and Kabbalists make a distinction between white and black magic. They say one is used for good and the other for evil. Anton LaVey, founder of the Church of Satan in San Francisco, California, says that there is no difference. Both white and black magic emanates from a satanic foundation.
There is no difference between white and black magic except in the smug hypocrisy, guilt-ridden righteousness, and self-deceit of the white magician himself.
Some demons are described as mischievous but not antagonistic towards God. Many Jewish historians acknowledge this.
In the Zohar, it is thought that the spirits of evil men became mazakim after their death. However, there are also good-natured devils who are prepared to help and do favors to men. This is supposed to be particularly true of those demons ruled by Ashmedai, who accept the Torah and are considered Jewish demons. In fact, demons could be both good and evil, and often were merely mischievous. In the main, demonology among the Jews preserved its simple character as a popular belief, the demons being regarded as mischievous, but not as diabolical or as agencies of a power antagonistic to God.
The Zohar teaches that the female demon Lilith had sexual intercourse with Adam when he separated from Eve and then with his descendants. It also teaches that Eve had intercourse with the serpent. Satan, who they call Samael, is also mentioned as having intercourse with demons. The 5th volume of the Encyclopedia Judaica and the Zohar documents this grotesque teaching.
In contrast, the Zohar, following a Talmudic legend, stresses the origin of the demons in sexual intercourse between humans and demonic powers. They sought to take on the form of a body through association with humans, at first with Adam when he separated from Eve, and then with all his descendants. However, the demons who were created out of such unions also long for this kind of intercourse. The sexual elements in the relationship of man and demons holds a prominent place in the demonology of the Zohar, as well as that of several later Kabbalistic works. Every pollution of semen gives birth to demons. They gather on a particular mountain near the mountains of darkness, where they have sexual intercourse with Samael. Rabbi Yitzhak said that from the time that Cain killed Hevel, Adam separated from his wife. 2 female spirits used to come and mate with him, and he bore from them spirits and demons that roam around the world. This need not be difficult to accept, because even when a man is dreaming, female spirits often come seduce him, conceive from him, and eventually give birth. These offspring are called the plagues of mankind, and take only the shape of humans.
Lilith, one of the prominent demonic figures in Kabbalistic mythology, was well known to many ancient mystery religions.
Lilith, an irresistible long-haired she-demon of the night, flies through Sumerian, Babylonian, Assyrian, Canaanite, Persian, Hebrew, Arabic, and Teutonic mythology. During the 3rd millennium BC in Sumer, she was at first Lil, a destructive storm or wind spirit. Among the Semites of Mesopotamia, she was Lilith, who later, confabulated with Lael, became Lilith, a night demon who lays hold of men and women who sleep alone, causing erotic dreams and nocturnal orgasm.
There is also a Jewish feminist magazine named after the demon Lilith. Let us understand where the Kabbalists adopted the doctrine of the tree of life. Is it the tree of life in Genesis chapter 2 verse 9, or the tree of the pagans which God condemns from the Old Testament? One way to find out is to take a perusal look at scriptures that condemns the worship of trees. Tree and idol worship was adopted by the Israelites from Canaan. The prophets protested against this.
Whom are you mocking? At whom do you sneer and stick out your tongue? Are you not a brood of rebels, the offspring of liars? You burn with lust among the oaks and under every spreading tree. And they set for themselves sacred pillars, and Asherim on every high hill and under every green tree.
What is noticeable from these scriptures is that tree worship brings with it a combination of images of the Canaanite goddess, sorcery, rebellion, sacred prostitution, and promiscuity.
Asherah. Originally, the idol was worshipped as a symbol of the tree of life, but later perverted to mean the origin of life, and pictured with the male organs of procreation. Such symbols became the objects of worship, carried on with all forms of impurity, perversion, and licentiousness by crowds of devotees involved in demonized and obscene orgies. The worship centered in the Canaanite nations and then spread into others.
Irwin Goodenough magisterial work, Jewish Symbols in the Greco-Roman Period, in Volume 12, proves beyond a doubt that the Sephirotic tree of the Kabbalists was extracted from paganism.
The tree, including its branches and fruit, appears in Jewish art most often of all the symbols borrowed from paganism. From earliest times, the tree seems to have had great religious significance in Mesopotamia as a symbol of deity, a vehicle or presence of deity, rather than of a specific god or goddess. It could accordingly be used to represent various gods as the giver of the fluid of life, an idea which later took the form of the trees being the mother of Tammuz or Adonis. That is, out of the tree came the deity, or divine force, to which people looked for their personal salvation. The meaning of the tree in Egypt was very similar, where often a goddess was represented in a tree pouring out the fluid of life upon the deceased, and where palm branches were carried in religious processions. Early Israel was much attracted by the tree cults of their neighbors. The apocalyptic and mystic ideas of the tree were continued especially in Kabbalistic traditions, where the divine Sephiroth, what we may call the emanations of God's nature, took the form of a tree, from which proceed all souls.
Jewish scholars who deny this should listen to what their internationally respected Encyclopedia Judica said about Goodenough's work.
In Goodenough's basic theories, there is sufficient material in his great work to stimulate investigation into previously neglected aspects of Judaism and into evidence which has been insufficiently examined.
There are other respected historians who did not decline to show the correspondence between the Sephirotic tree and its connections to paganism. The Kabbalists who are not ignorant should not deny this fact, but admit with the Jewish Encyclopedia Volume 12 that the Hebrews joined their neighbors in the polytheistic worship of trees.
Trees have been objects of worship in all parts of the world, and the Hebrews were no exception to this.
This polytheistic religion of tree worship is robbing God of his glory and giving it over to a diabolical pantheon of deities. This is why the Kabbalah has a plentorious secrets. Overall, their religion is pantheistic and not monotheistic. This will be evident as we plunge deeper into the mysteries of the Kabbalah. By prayers, amulets, and incantations, the Hasidim believe they can manipulate the Tetragrammaton to do their bidding.
All Jewish healers employ the same principle. Anyone possessing the secret of God's name has the power over life and death. At first this may seem odd. After all, God's name appears hundreds of times in the Torah, but it should not be pronounced. It is said that the common names for God in the Torah are simply codes for his true name, which also appears, but in a more subtle way. Some claim that the entire Torah is actually God's name, which explains why generations of Jews have pored over the ancient texts. Hidden within God's name is the secret of life and death. Can such power really be contained within a single word? In effect, it can, since this word is an object in itself, a tangible and real convergence of sound, text, paper, and ink. Even in prayer, God's true name is replaced by Adonai, or my master. In less sacred circumstances, people say Adoshem, a contraction of Adon, or master, and Shem, or name. But even this is often too powerful, and many people simply say Hashem, the name. God's name combines Shem with soul, or neshama, and breath, or neshima. Merely pronouncing the word has the power to grant life to people, animals, and even inanimate objects, as the story of Rabbi Yehuda Loew of Prague illustrates. By just repeating God's name, he was able to give life to the Golem. The story itself is reminiscent of Genesis, where it is God who breathes life into a lump of clay, turning it into Adam. The role of healer is to restore vitality, or metaphorically to breathe life into an inert lump of clay. He does this through rituals that emulate the creation myth and God's own breath of life. He takes of God's own power, manifest in the sacred name, and uses it for healing. Actually, the healer can be regarded as a thief who steals some of the divine essence of life and channels it to his own patient.
Practical Kabbalah, or the art of employing the knowledge of the hidden world in order to attain one purpose, is founded upon the mysticism developed in the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation. According to this work, God created the world by means of letters of the alphabet, and particularly those of his name. This was practiced in a similar fashion by the Assyrians, Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans.
The chief means of harming or of protecting from harm was the utterance of some word or words invested with the highest magical power, and whoever knew the right word had influence over gods and demons, for they could not resist the command, spoken under certain necessary and auspicious conditions. Magic pervaded the religions of Assyrians, Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans, and in a still higher degree the religions of primitive peoples.
Many Israelites rebel against Yahweh when he said to learn not the ways of the heathen. The Kabbalists who claim to have this trump card on the Tetragrammaton is mentioned in the Jewish Encyclopedia as a master of creation.
If one learns these combinations and permutations and applies them at the right time and in the right place, one may thus easily make himself master of creation.
Fanciful stories in Jewish folklore about Kabbalists magically extracting power from the Tetragrammaton to create a golem is thought to be true. An authority on the Kabbalah lists some examples of these farcical bedtime stories.
Once upon a time there was a great rabbi in Prague. His name was Rabbi Judah Loew ben Bezalel, and he is known in Jewish tradition as the Maharal of Prague. A famous scholar and mystic, he is credited by Jewish popular tradition with the creation of a golem, a creature produced by the magical power of a man and taking on human shape. Rabbi Lowe's robot was made of clay and given a sort of life by being infused with the concentrated power of the rabbi's mind. The great human power is, however, nothing but a reflection of God's own creative power. The rabbi finally put a slip of paper into its mouth with the mystic and ineffable name of God written on it. So long as this seal remained in his mouth, the golem was alive. It is the latest embodiment of this magic which we are privileged to dedicate today. It is then any wonder that man should try to do in his own small way what God did in the beginning. The Talmud tells a little story. Rabbah created a man and sent him to Rabbi Zerah. The rabbi spoke to him, but he did not answer. Whereupon the rabbi said, "You must have been made by my colleagues of the academy. Return to your dust." The universe, so the Kabbalists tells us, is built essentially on the prime elements of numbers and letters, because the letters of God's language reflected in human language are nothing but concentrations of his creative energy. Thus, by assembling these elements in all their possible combinations and permutations, the Kabbalist, who contemplates the mysteries of creation, radiates some of this elementary power into the golem. The creation of a golem is then in some way an affirmation of the productive and creative power of man. It repeats the work of creation.
The desire to create is common to us all, but there are elements in Judaism which may have made men more daring to contemplate the act of God, creation. The way of the soul, seeking to understand a world of mystery and magic. From it would come an esoteric philosophy, Kabbalah, which virtually up until modern times was one of the motor engines of Judaism. Among the Kabbalists were some who embraced the idea of the creation of an artificial man.
The Talmud mentions how the prophet Jeremiah created a golem. It also tells us that the great sage Rava created a golem. But, truly righteous as Rava was, he could not create a golem that could speak. For to have created such a being would have made Rava the equal of God. No golem from later legend would have the power of speech.
Scattered far from their Jerusalem, Jewish scholars would discuss the story of Rava and his golem for centuries. Could one become so pure and righteous as to create?
The God of the Kabbalists is reduced to being a Kadi. By saying the right words, he is rushing to assist the mystic. The story of the Golem does not end with what was quoted before. By certain meditative techniques and chanting, the Canaanite mystic is said to create a mental image of a human being and use it for astral travel.
There is also evidence that creating a golem was primarily not a physical procedure, but rather a highly advanced meditative technique. By chanting the appropriate letter arrays together with the letters of the tetragrammaton, the initiate could form a very real mental image of a human being, limb by limb. This possibly could be used as an astral body through which one could ascend to the spiritual realms.
Rabbi Joshua Trachtenberg made some revealing remarks about the Jews who used these black arts.
The sources indicate that Jews were at least acquainted with methods of inducing disease and death, of arousing and killing passion, of forcing people to do their bidding, of employing demons for divinatory and other purposes. We find accounts of the magician's power to project his soul to far distant places, there to perform an errand, and then return to his comatose body.
The use of divination and magic was strictly forbidden to Israel. Yahweh's condemnation of these black arts is expressed in Leviticus chapter 19 verse 26 and Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 9 to 14. The origin of what is known as the Star of David was a recent addition to the Jewish religion. Gershom Scholem traces its Jewish clone theology back to the middle of the 19th century.
Until the middle of the 19th century, no scholar or Kabbalist got the idea of trying to detect in the star anything like the secret of its Jewish meaning. It does not appear at all in books on the religious life, nor in the entire literature of Hasidism. And this was the case not because such meaning was assumed and not considered problematical, but rather because no one even dreamt of such meaning.
The six-pointed star or hexagram became the insignia of Zionism. The star was mentioned and condemned by the God of Israel in Amos chapter 5 verse 26, and it was called by him the star of your god Moloch, or otherwise called Kiun. Reference to Amos chapter 5 verse 26 and the Israelites having it in the wilderness was also made in Acts chapter 7 verse 43. Here it was called the star of Remphan. All these names refer to the god Satan. The foregoing verifies that it was therefore in existence long before the time of Solomon. He took this symbol upon himself when he went into idolatry, and it became known as the Seal of Solomon in Arabic magic and witchcraft. The six-pointed star is as old as the Assyrian and Phoenician religion.
Assyrian and later also Phoenician and Hebrew seals often display a six-pointed star with 6 rays beaming forth from its center.
The hexagram is also a Hindu tantric symbol, which represents the sexual connection between the god Shiva and Shakti. The Kabbalists adopted this Indo-Canaanite teaching and remodeled it to mean Yahweh's lustful relationship to the Shekinah. Remember, this is not the Yahweh of the Old Testament. It is the Kabbalist syncretic god of Canaan.
The real history of the hexagram began with Tantric Hinduism, where it represented union of the sexes. The downward pointing triangle was the female primordial image or yoni yantra, existing before the universe. In the course of infinite time, the goddess conceived a spark of life within her triangle, the bindu, which was eventually born and developed into a male, symbolized by the upward pointing triangle. He united with his mother to form the primal androgyny. The sign of this union was the hexagram. The downward pointing triangle is a female symbol corresponding to the yoni. It is called Shakti. The upward pointing triangle is the male, the lingam, and is called the fire. From the tantric image of the sexual hexagram arose a Jewish system of sex worship connected with the medieval Kabbalah and a rabbinical tradition that a picture is supposed to be placed in the Ark of the Covenant alongside of the tables of the laws, which shows a man and a woman in intimate embrace in the form of a hexagram.
As we continue, you will see the Kabbalah is saturated with occult sexual imagery. The Jewish Encyclopedia admits that the hexagram or the Star of David is equally reverenced in Hinduism. Watch any documentary on Hinduism and oftentimes you would see the hexagram. This symbol is very important in witchcraft and the New Age movement. Christ taught that the secrets of the synagogue of Satan would be exposed in the last days. Christ was a threat to the synagogue of Satan because he revealed many of their occult practices. In part 1 of this series, we zeroed in on the origins of the Kabbalah, Demonology, and the Star of David. In this volume, we will delve deeper into the mysterious and perverse teachings of the Zohar. Before I pursued my research on the Kabbalah, I was already familiar with the occult, but when I single out the Zohar for research, I quickly recognized that this is Satan's creme de la creme of the occult. Perhaps you too will notice this fascinating revelation.
The whole dualistic system of good and evil powers, which goes back to Zoroastrianism and ultimately to Old Chaldea, can be traced through Gnosticism, having influenced the cosmology of the ancient Kabbalah before it reached the medieval one. So is the conception underlying the Kabbalistic tree, of the right side being the source of light and purity, and the left the source of darkness and impurity. Luria clearly took a significant step beyond the intellectual world of the Zohar, in that he found the starting point of evil not in one or another point in the Sephirotic structure, but in the very act of God's self-contraction within his own being. The evil inclination never leaves man from the day of his birth. The good inclination comes to man only when he seeks purity. And when does man seek purity? On his 13th birthday, man joins with the good inclination on the right and the evil inclination of the left. They are literally two appointed angels found constantly with man.
The Old and New Testament told us much regarding the nature of Yahweh. He is presented as holy, merciful, just, and good. Evil cannot be found in him.
The Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abundant in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. Give unto the Lord the glory due unto his name. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. Who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like thee, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders? But as he which hath called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation, because it is written, Be ye holy, for I am holy. What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? God forbid.
Yahweh also promises to create within us a mind to do what is right. This is not the case with the gods of the Kabbalah and the occult world. They embrace a satanic dualism, where God is both good and evil. Many people find this hard to digest. So to make it palatable, the occultist gives the nebulous explanation for the existence of evil. People of this serpentine religion say the purpose of evil is to reveal his goodness.
Light would be incomprehensible without darkness, to make it manifest by contrast. Good would be no good without evil, to show the priceless nature of the boon, and so personal virtue could claim no merit unless it had passed through the furnace of temptation.
Eliphas Levi, in his occult classic The History of Magic, accentuates this diabolical dualism in a stealthy way.
Seeing that, according to the most exalted interpretation of the great Hermetic dogma, hell is the equilibrating reason of heaven, for harmony results from the analogy of contraries.
Satan is the author of this poisonous dualism. It was entwined in his Sermon of Enlightenment in Genesis chapter 3 verse 4 to 7, and its enduring lie is preserved in the Zohar, the king of all mystery religions.
In fact, there can be no true worship except it issue forth from darkness, and no true good except it proceed from evil. Hence, the perfection of all things is attained when good and evil are first of all commingled, and then become all good, for there is no good so perfect as that which issues out of evil. And the Lord formed the man with both good and evil inclination. Observe, he said, that the Holy One, blessed be He, made a right and a left for the ruling of the world. The one is called good, the other evil, and He made man to be a combination of the two.
The principles of Marxism are also found in the Kabbalah. Rabbi Harry Wotton draws an interesting parallel between the Kabbalah and Karl Marx's blueprint for communism.
No idea is more productive of a deeper insight into existence than the idea of dialectics. The law of dialectics postulates that all conduct in time turns into its opposite. The Kabbalah expresses this thought as follows: There is no light but that which comes out from darkness, for when this side of darkness is subordinated, then ascends the Holy One in the high and is glorified. And there is no work of the Holy One but from darkness, and there is no good but from evil. How can we explain in history why individualism must give way to collectivism, and how competition can bring out cooperation? The possibility thereof, nay, the inevitability of this dialectic movement, constitutes the essence of the Marxian philosophy. How can we hope to understand this process without the law of dialectics?
Marx borrowed the notion of an historical dialectic from Hegel's and applied this concept to history from his point of view. There are also many parallels in Hegel's lecture on the philosophy of religion with the Luranic Kabbalah.
Like the Kabbalists, Hegel understands the absolute as evolving through the distinct phases, which ultimately results in the creation of the world and man. Indeed, Hegel's description of at least the early stages of divine evolution closely echoes the views of the Theosophical Kabbalah. In his lectures on the philosophy of religion, Hegel recognizes a moment in the history of the deity in which it is completely unknown. Hegel tells that this idea is prominent in the history of religious speculation, noting that Philo, a Jewish Platonist, defines God as the Ovi, as what has being, in other words, the hidden God who is unknowable, uncommunicative, inconceivable. Hegel informs us that this moment in divine evolution is also spoken of as the Eternal One, whose dwelling is in the inexpressible heights, and who is exalted above all contact. If Hegel's first moment or definition of God is very similar to the Kabbalist's first Sephirah, Keter, or Ayin, his second definition echoes the Kabbalist's second Sephirah, Hakma.
To justify the Kabbalist view of theodicy, the Zohar presents evil as an innocuous instrument of God to cleanse sinners.
Evil is there simply in order to increase man's chances. Because God wanted man to be free, He ordained the real existence of evil, that He might prove His moral strength in overcoming it. It is the desire of the Holy One, blessed be He, that men should serve Him continually and walk in the path of truth, so that He might reward them with many good things. Now, since this is the desire of the Holy One, blessed be He, how can the wicked servant come and object to his master's desire, and persuade men to take an evil path, and force them away from the good path, and make them disobedient to their Lord? But he is actually doing the will of his master. In his attempt to persuade man to break the commandments, the evil inclination is acting as an agent of God.
From the last quote, it would appear that Satan plays a very important part in our redemption. Here is another example of Lucifer's creation of the Zohar to attack the God of the Bible. The Bible says God is not responsible for man's temptations. Temptation originates with the devil. The choice is ours, whether we give allegiance to him or Yahweh.
Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then, when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death.
You decide whether the God of the Kabbalah is similar in nature to Lucifer.
The theory of evolution accords with the series of Kabbalah better than any other theory. Evolution follows a path of ascent and thus provides the world with a basis for optimism. How can one despair, seeing that everything evolves and ascends? When we penetrate the inner nature of evolution, we find divinity illuminated in perfect clarity. Ein Sof generates, actualizes potential infinity.
The concept of evolution did not originate with Charles Darwin. It has been the essential ingredient of all pagan religions and philosophies from time immemorial. For example, optimism, pantheism, stoicism, Gnosticism, and all other humanistic and polytheistic systems, all beliefs which assume the ultimacy of the space-time-matter universe, presupposing that the universe has existed from eternity, are fundamentally evolutionary systems. The cosmos, with its innate laws and forces, is the only ultimate reality. From this perspective, it becomes obvious that most of the great world religions, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, Hinduism, animism, are based on evolution. This is attested to in two books which have left an indelible mark upon the occult.
It will be an easy task to show that the cosmogonical legends all over the world are based on a knowledge by the ancients of those sciences which have allied themselves in our days in support of the doctrine of evolution, and that further research may demonstrate that those ancients were far better acquainted with the fact of evolution itself, embracing both its physical and spiritual aspects, than we are now. The occultists of the ancient world had a most remarkable understanding of the principle of evolution. They recognized all life as being in various stages of becoming. They believed that grains of sand were in the process of becoming human. The ancients maintained that the universe was a great living organism, not unlike the human body, and that every phase and function of the universe body had a correspondence in man.
This New Age Babylonian religion is taught in our schools under the guise of evolution.
Millennia before Charles Darwin, people in shamanic cultures were convinced that humans and animals were related. Judging from the material that we have, the Babylonians seem to have believed in a kind of evolution. for they evidently regarded the first creative powers, the watery waste and the abyss, as the rude and barbaric beginnings of things, the divine powers produced from these first principles.
When the West brought Darwin's pseudo-beliefs to India, it gave credence to their worship of the monkey god Hanuman.
In gratitude for this important finding, so unexpectedly confirming their ancient legend, they very nearly promote philologists to the rank of the gods. Darwin climaxed this whole subject. With the spread of Western education and scientific literature in India, the people became more than ever convinced that we are the descendants of their Hanuman, monkey god. Once that science, in the person of Darwin, supports the wisdom of the Aryans, there is nothing left for us to do but to submit. And, surely, it is better to have Hanuman the poet, the hero and the god, for a forefather, than some other monkey. According to Hindu cosmology, the origin of all things was a vast expanding centrifugal force or explosion, which today we call the Big Bang. The principle of this explosion that gives birth to the world is called Shiva. The Big Bang theory of modern scientists is strikingly similar to the way some Jewish mystics describe the creation. For if the Big Bang theory is accurate, scientists may be confirming the creation myths of the Jewish and Hindu mystics. Just as science has confirmed the ideas behind Jewish and Hindu creation myths, so it has lent credibility to other statements Jewish mystics have made about the universe.
While the groundwork was laid to persuade people that evolution was a science, the world of the occult was being hardened in their midst. Added to the equation of evolution was the notion that if we had evolved from matter to human, then the last stage is from human to being a god. Once this lie had gained acceptance, the time was ripe for Lucifer's genesis of lies: ye shall evolve and be as gods.
Everybody from Jesus Christ to Adolf Hitler would be seen as someone who we can identify with because we are all one.
I think that certainly there is every potential for all of us as spiritual beings to merge as one.
We've mastered the evolution of the physical body. We've mastered the evolution of the mind, or we're moving in that direction. So we're coming to a time where we're using this perfected, quasi-perfected body, this opening and perfecting mind, to access the true perfection of the universe, which is the spiritual dimension. And that's, I think, our purpose on earth, and I think we're understanding that, is to make ourselves whole, to become one with ourselves, and then to realize our godhood.
And I believe that everyone has Christ consciousness within themselves, and all they need to do is go inside and realize that and bring it forward and be that Christ consciousness.
This, the evolution of man into Superman, was always the purpose of the ancient mysteries. Man, who has sprung from the earth and developed through the lower kingdoms of nature to his present rational state, has yet to complete his evolution by becoming a godlike being and unifying his conscience with the omniscient. While natural selection does not adequately describe the inner development of humans, especially since it has been interpreted materially, yet evolution is not just a scientific theory of the development of life forms, but a great cosmic principle describing the development of consciousness. Many researchers now espouse the ageless wisdom teaching that consciousness precedes matter, and that the material universe is the outer, dense expression of divine consciousness, the outer embodiment of a divine idea.
Darwin was a pawn in the game of Satan to erode people's confidence in the Bible. All the previous religions we have mentioned that have similarities with the theory of evolution also have parallel beliefs with the Kabbalah. This is why the liberal Kabbalists romanticize evolution in their publications.
Our civilization has been transformed over the past century and a half in no small part by our acceptance of a new tale of origins, one that began with Darwin and is refined daily by the work of life scientists and physicists. Scientists are the new Kabbalists of our age, claiming even to know the black hole out of which being itself came to be, speculating on the first few seconds of existence, as our ancestors once did on the highest triad of the 10 Sephirot, or rungs of divine being.
The New Age Kabbalists fell for Satan's first lie. The following quotes will show how they apotheosized themselves.
God places himself for display upon earth in the likeness of the Jew. The Hebrew is the living God, the God become flesh, the heavenly man, the Adam Kadmon. The soul of a Jew is truly a part of God above.
Not only do the New Age Kabbalists claim that they can become gods, Rabbi Yehuda in the Zohar says that in the near future, they will have power to create worlds and raise the dead.
In the name of the Rav, Rabbi Yehuda said that in the future the righteous will create worlds and raise the dead.
And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit.